Hello, this is John Majori with MajoriOnBowie.com, and I am thrilled today to have a very, very special guest, the one and only Ava Cherry. Now, if you've come to this blog, you know who Ava Cherry is, but I'm going to tell you anyways. Ava is a singer, a model, a performer who visitors to my blog know of in part because of her collaborations with David Bowie and in part because of her collaborations with Luther Vandross. She was a key figure in the creation of one of Bowie's most beloved albums, Young Americans. She helped him conceptualize the album and contributed vocals and added her own unique style to his evolving sound. Beyond her work with Bowie, Ava has had a very diverse career in music, working with artists such as Luther Vandross, as I mentioned, and she has terrific solo material, including a new song that's out, Fire, which we'll talk about, as well as a memoir, All That Glitters, which is terrific. It's available in paperback. It is packed with stories about her life, about Bowie, about Luther Vandross, Bob Marley, the Rolling Stones, and much more, so much more that we won't be able to talk about everything in the book, which is why you should buy the book and read it, because it's great. So Ava's presence in both fashion and music has left an indelible mark on pop culture. So Ava Cherry, thank you. I'm so honored to have you join me today.
Oh, my goodness, what a nice introduction. Hello, everybody. Thank you, John.
So, Ava, thank you. Before we get into David Bowie and Luther Vandross and all that, can you tell us about the new song, Fire? I mean, I've heard it. It sounds terrific.
Thank you. Well, you know, my fans, if you guys, when we finish with this and you go and check me out, I've done mostly... I started out in dance music, and then, you know, I started doing R&B as well, and I worked with Curtis Mayfield as well, and a few other artists. This is a dance house track. So for all you people that love to groove and dance and feel, you know, some swag, that's what this is, Fire. It's, you know, a sexy mood groove song. So I just thought I'd throw that out there for you so you can groove with me.
Yeah, it's wonderful. So just very quickly, you have albums, Ripe, Streetcar Named Desire, Spend the Night. Music is released differently today. When you have a new song like Fire, how does it get out there? How do people get to hear it?
Well, you know, there's so many genres of music now. They've separated it, which I don't love that part about it. You know, your EDM, your dance, your house, your soul, your street urban, your pop, there's so many different genres that they try to dissect you into. To me, music is music, people. I love music, period, and I listen to everything, you know, and what I love, I love. So I don't put myself in that category, but how you do it is, you know, you either have a record label, you know, big or small, you know, the big labels, they have the money to really promote. Then you could be on a smaller label, which doesn't have as much money to promote, but they still do some things for you. And then there's the independent way. You do it yourself. You go through iTunes, Spotify, all the media outlets. And they, you know, put your music out there, and, you know, you get streams, you know, whatever, blah, blah, blah. So that's all the ways. And most people these days are going independent because it's very, very, very expensive to do it the other ways. Sometimes it catches fire right away. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time. And sometimes you have fans that follow you no matter what. And I have fans that follow me. And thank you so much, my fans, whoever they are and wherever they are around the world. And so, you know, but it shouldn't damper anybody who wants to be in the business or is in the business. Get your music put forward. If you believe in yourself, you just put it out there. You put your beauty, your energy, your love, and everything out there to the world, and let us enjoy it.
Yeah. Well, thank you. So if you haven't heard the song yet and you're listening, you now know how to track it down, and it's worth tracking down because it is on fire. Now, Ava, you're going to be involved with something else that's coming out, I think in November. You're featured very prominently in the documentary about Luther Vandross, Never Too Much. What can you tell us about that?
Yes, I think in November they're going to start to put it out to the AMC theaters.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to put a teaser out to the AMC theaters, but I don't think the actual film is going to be available with CNN Movie Entertainment Company or something like that in 2025.
Okay. And you're featured very prominently in that. Is that correct?
Yes, I am. I'm in 70% of the film because it starts off with Luther Vandross, how he started Sesame Street, blah blah blah. And for those people that only listen to his music and don't know him, Luther did so many things before. Commercials. I mean, he was a millionaire doing commercials before he ever did his first real song. So it just starts from the beginning and where he came from, New York and whatever. And then it gets into all of his magnificent performances and the shows that we did. So, yes, I am featured prominently. And, people, when I look back at this film, I say to myself, boy, I really worked hard. because, man, those tours I did with Luther, we had, 10-hour days, 10 hours, 6 days a week, 10-hour days of rehearsals before we did those performances. And, in London and Paris, everywhere, all around the world, in America. So I'm just so grateful and so happy that I worked with an artist. There is no one like him and never will be, the great Luther Vandross.
So I was going to ask you this later, but you mentioned the very intense work. In your book, it struck me that the rehearsals and the preparation seemed to be very intense as well. He seemed like he was really trying to draw the most out of everybody who worked with him on stage. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Everybody that worked with him on stage was a solo artist in their own right. I mean, each person was so good. Luther handpicked everyone. So he had the best musicians, the best dancers, the best singers, everything. And like I was saying earlier, we had, 6 days a week we rehearsed for, 2 months before the tour, 2 or 3 months, and, in 10-hour days. And sometimes we would cry. We'd be tired. And, but Luther was like, we got to do this. We got to get this. It's got to be perfect, And at first, I thought, oh, God, he's really a slave driver. But I am so appreciative of Luther that he made us rehearse it. Because I'm telling you, when you're doing a show, if you do that and you get those rehearsals in, your audience is going to appreciate it so much. We would be in rehearsal and Luther would be, we'd first start off, he'd get a choreographer, and we would first start off with us learning, myself, Lisa Fisher, and Kevin Owens, and Lisa was with the Rolling Stones. He would, we would do it with the choreographer at first, and it was all the different moves to every word of the song, blah blah blah, and that was very difficult if you weren't a dancer, because we were not dancers, we were singers that danced, and so that was the hardest part. But once we would get the skeleton of that down, then Luther would show up. And he'd get a chair, and he would sit right there the whole rehearsal and watch us try to put the music together with the choreography. And wow, if you could imagine him just sitting there and watching us. Occasionally he would go, "Okay, Ava, your fingers weren't extended out far enough in that move," and I'd be like, "Oh my God!" I mean, it was really that intense. But boy, wow. Oh boy, am I glad, y'all, that he did that to me, because I just learned the work ethic of rehearsal, and just getting it right and nailing it down as best you could,
So is the first time you worked with him on Young Americans?
Yes. No, the first time I worked with him was when David decided to get, when I was with David first, and we decided to do the Young Americans album, then he to us by Carlos Alomar and Robin Clark, his wife, to Sigma Sound as somebody that was going to be one of the singers. And then Luther ended up being, vocal director and everything. Luther, the minute that he brought him to the studio, David looked at me and said, he's the one. We got to do it with him. And
yeah.
I'm so happy we did.
So let's go further back. How did you meet Bowie?
Oh, honey, I don't know if we've got enough time for all of that one, but let me help. Yeah.
Yeah. I was going to say, the story in the book makes it sound like you willed it into existence. You decided one day you're going to get to know David Bowie, and you just made it happen.
Well, yeah, because I was a model in New York, and I had just moved to New York and got an apartment. It took a while to do that, and I was dating a guy who had a hair salon, and one day he said, "Ava, will you bleach blonde your hair and let us cut it short for the New York Times?" And I was like, I had never seen any other girl wear their hair that way. And he said, it's going to be a first and it'll be really exciting. So I did. I let them bleach blonde my hair and cut it short. And it was in the New York Times. And that was my image then. So then I started working also for a high discotheque there called Genesis that was very high end. And then I was doing that. But while I was there, I got a manager. And this manager said to me, "Oh, your hair is great. Loved my hair being bleached blonde." And so one day he brought this album to me, and it was Ziggy Stardust. And he goes, "Listen, it's this British artist named David Bowie, and I think he's going to be huge." He said, "You should listen to his music." So I don't really know exactly why he gave me his record, because it had anything to do with my career, but he gave it to me. I said, okay. I took it home, and I listened to it, and I was just smitten from the very beginning of listening to it, because I'd always been somebody who was a Trekkie and somebody who was into space and all that. And when he started talking about being a starman and Moon Age Daydream and blah, blah, I mean, I listened to it and I fell in love with this record and this man. I fell in love with him literally. Just looking at him, I said, wow, he's gorgeous and it's unique, and I've never seen anybody like him. But he was not successful here yet. They were just getting ready to send him out of England to Radio City in New York, and his first major tour in America. And so, like I said, I fell in love with him. And then the next thing I knew, I was friends with Stevie Wonder, and he was giving a show at Carnegie Hall, and he said, "Ava, where should we give the party, the after party at Carnegie Hall?" And I said, "Well, why don't you give it in the place I work in, And so he said, okay. So sure enough, he arranged that we gave this party there, and we were at the party, and everybody is having a great time, and Gladys and Aretha and everybody's down there, all enjoying the music and singing. And my manager runs up to me and he goes, "Ava, you're not going to believe this. You know that guy I was telling you about, David Bowie? He's in the room." I'm like, "What?" So I'm freaked out, because by then I was already like kind of in love with him. I was like, oh my gosh. He goes, "I'm going to go get him and bring him over." And I'm like, oh no. I was just totally freaked out. So he brings him over, and David was, had like this, electric blue, I think, jacket on with this red hair, really high, his Ziggy look. And he walks over to me and he goes, and he takes my hand and he kisses it, and he goes, "Pleasure to meet you, Ava." He goes, this is Ava Cherry, David Bowie. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Ava." And he kisses my hand, and I thought I was going to fall on the floor. And he goes, "I love your hair." And then I said, "I love your hair." And we were just like there, just like, exchanging "I love your hairs" and things like that. What we were saying, it was the most wonderful introduction. He was such a gentleman, and I thought, oh my goodness. And then, so I was singing when he walked over to me. He goes, "Are you a singer?" And I said, "Well, I'm aspiring to be." And he goes, "Well, I was listening to you, and I'm getting ready to do this tour in Japan, and I was watching you and your image and how you sounded, and I was thinking you would be perfect for my show." would you be interested in doing this tour with me? I'm like, you want me to tour with you? He goes, yeah. I was like, oh, yeah, of course. Oh, my God. He said, okay, well, I need you to audition for me with my manager, Tony DeFries, at Main Man at RCA tomorrow, and be there at 3 o'clock, and then we'll take it from there. And that's how I met him.
So that's an amazing story. So you start working with him, and you were one of the singers in the 1980 floor show. Is that right?
Yes. But before that, before that, you're leaving out the part where after he hired me, and I told him I had to go to Chicago to say goodbye to my parents.
Yeah.
I quit my apartment and my job, and I came here to Chicago. And 5 days after I was here, I got a telegram saying that David had gotten ill and that the tour was canceled. So I was totally despondent and freaked out, and so I didn't know what I was going to do. And so I had been invited to go to Monaco, to Monte Carlo, which I'd never been to Europe before, by a guy that was trying to date me. And I told him no when he had asked me, because I said I'm going to be touring with this guy, David Bowie. But when that happened, I called the guy up and I said, I'll come to Monaco, because I knew if I got to Europe, I could find David, and I was obsessed by that. I knew I had to find him, and I don't know what, something just kept pushing me. No matter what, my parents tried to get me, they were afraid for me to go, and they said, well, you sure you could? And I said, yeah, Mom, I've got to go. I have to find David. And then I went there, and I went to France and hung out there for a minute, and then I went on to Paris, and that is where I found David.
So you didn't just go to Paris. You went to a specific place and waited until he showed up. Right?
I went to Monaco. I went to Monaco first, which is it was the south of France. And then the friend I was with sent me to Paris. I said, well, where should I go? And he said, you should go to Paris, and you should sit outside the Café de Flore, which was like the place to be if you were in an outside cafe in Paris, where all the top models, the actors, everybody who was anybody went there. And so I went and sat there and with my book, because I was a model at the time. And he said, just you'll meet people. So I went there and I sat there, and as I was sitting there, I just remember myself saying, does anybody in here speak English? In this French, beautifully, sitting in the Café de Flore in Paris on the Boulevard Saint-Germain. And so this guy from North Africa, his name was Jocelyn, he worked for a very top fashion house called Cerruti in Paris. He said, I speak English. And then he came and he sat down next to me, and we started talking, started asking me where I was from, blah, blah, blah. And I told him I was a model, and I was looking for this guy, David Bowie, and I had my model book. And he goes, oh, maybe I can help you with your modeling. So he got me an agency. He said, well, where are you staying? I said, I'm staying in an all-girls hotel. He goes, you can stay at my house. I don't know. This is a miracle. This guy let me stay at his house. He was a gay man. He was a wonderful, wonderful, loving person. And I was happy that he was gay, because I didn't have to worry about him like trying to jump on my bones, And so I thought, this is perfect. He took care of me. He made sure I ate. He was, he was a loving. I mean, it was just, I had, God on my shoulder the whole time. Every time I thought I was in a dilemma, something came and bailed me out and helped me to the next level. And then one day, 8 months later, I had the most wonderful time in Paris. But 8 months later, I still had not found David. And I was in this bar. And I'm sitting there with a friend of mine, and I'm having a drink. And I hear them say David Bowie's name. And so I go running down to the other end of the bar, and I say, excusez-moi, tu as dit David Bowie? And he said, oui, il est là-bas à Chez Castel, meaning he is across the street at Chez Castel, which was a very upper class, very rich nightclub. And I said, really? He said, yes. So I'm not dripping in diamonds and pearls. I just looked really cute. And I go over to the club, and you had to go downstairs, and I popped my head down, and I see Stewie, which was David's bodyguard. He was Cockney guy, and he sees me. Stewie comes walking over to me, and he goes, "Ava, what are you doing here?" And I said, "I came from America to find David." He goes, "Oh my God." The governor's not going to believe this, because he used to call David the governor. That's what and so anyway, he takes me in the club, and I see David as I'm walking in, sitting next to this French woman, beautifully dressed, with diamonds and pearls hanging off of her. And I said, "Oh man, I don't know if I'm going to be able to compete with that, whatever." So David wasn't looking straight ahead. He was talking to her, so he didn't see me come up to him. And as I got up to him, I got right in his face. He was sitting down, and I got right in his face, and he looked up, and he said, "Oh, Ava?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Oh, my God, what are you doing here?" I said, I came all the way here to find you, David." He goes, You came all the way here to find me?" I said, "Yeah, because I couldn't let you go." And he goes, "Oh, my goodness." So he says to me, "Sit down," on the other side of him. This other woman was saying. And about 10 minutes later, he takes my hand. He goes, "Let's go." And that was it. We went to the Chateau d'Eauville, into the fairy tale of the Chateau d'Eauville in the countryside of France, 17th century recording studio. And that's where we made music, we made love. It was the most wonderful time in my life.
I was going to ask, was it as fun as it sounds?
John, I would not make anything like that up. I would just say, "Oh, it was a great working experience." But I was in love with him. He was the first man that I was really, really in love with.
Yeah, it's an amazing story, and it's also a testament to just your determination that you decide you want something and you just make it happen.
Yes, I was always. My mom told me I was always. I said, if you ever wanted something, you just asked for it, and you didn't. If you could get it, you wouldn't take no for an answer. And I wasn't overbearing or anything. I just was very determined. I just, when I was young, because my mother worked for Playboy, she worked in the corporate office, but then I worked for Hugh Hefner. I was a bunny, so I was around before I even met David Bowie. I was around people that were rich and famous, and I was, and so I learned how to be, how to deal with them and how to. If I wanted to do something or be involved with them, how to talk to them. And, it was, thinking back on it now, what an experience it was.
So now you're working with him and you're making music, and at this point he still looks like we think of Ziggy Stardust, and he did when he was doing the 1984 show, but that show was sort of the end of his glam period, and although it had some funky elements, I think a viewer would have probably been surprised at the turn his career would take, but you had a lot to do with that. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is correct, because when he decided that he was at the end of his Ziggy period, he said to me, we were living on Oakley Street, Oakley Street, in London, and he said, "Ava, I'm done with Ziggy right now. I want another phase in my life, and I want to do soul music." And so I laughed. I said, "You want to do soul music?" He goes, "Yeah, because I love all the soul artists out there, Michael Jackson, Marvin Gaye, James Brown." He says, I love all the soul artists out there, Aretha and Gladys. And he said, I want to sing those kind of songs. I said, "Okay." Well, I said, if you want to do that, then maybe you should go to a place where you're going to see at least 5 of those acts that you just now mentioned to me, all performing on the same bill at the Apollo in New York. I said, if we go there, you can get an idea of what that looks like, And so he goes, "Oh, okay, let's do that." So he started making phone calls to America, and he sent me on to New York, and I was staying at the Gramercy Park Hotel, and waiting for him to come. He didn't come for like a month later, and by this time he had gotten hold of Tony Sylvester, who was a very prominent producer at that time. Tony, in turn, got a hold of people like Carlos Alomar, and told them that what David was looking for, and that he wanted to come to the Apollo. So Carlos was performing with Cuba Gooding's father's group at the time. Yeah. But anyway, we went, and the night we went, it was the Temptations, the Spinners, Richard Pryor was the comedian, and Carlos was playing with this group, with the Cuba Gooding's father. And so afterwards, we talked for a little while, and David got to meet Richard Pryor and all that. And David was like, "Oh man, that was the best show. That was the best show I've seen. It was so soulful, And so then we decided that we were going to go to Sigma Sound in Philadelphia and record. And David was trying to get the musicians that played all the famous Philadelphia Sound songs for all the famous artists there, the OJs, everybody. But they were afraid to play with us for some reason. David would have been the first a white artist that they would have done that with, and they were a little bit afraid to do it. So they declined to do it. And so, David, this is what I love about David. David was like, okay, so I'll put together my own group. So that was when we invited Carlos to come to Sigma. And when he came to Sigma, and Robin Clark, they brought Luther. And that's how we met Luther.
Yeah. Wow.
And from the moment that David and I opened that door, and we were standing there together when they came in, David looked at me once we got into, and David just had Luther to sing a little bit. He had an idea. He looked at me. He goes, "This is it. He's the one. I definitely want him." And that was how we began, creating Young Americans.
Yeah. So you also suggested to him ideas that really shaped his image. Like you introduced him to the concept and the word Gouster, and there's a story that you tell in your book about how you gave him some of your father's clothing. So
yeah.
what is a Gouster, and what was the significance of the clothing?
Well, okay, the Gousters in Chicago, and I don't know about any place else, was like the guys all wore baggy pants, and we had a certain kind of dance, slow dance that we did that was a very black thing. And and everybody knew the dances, and everybody wore the clothes, and it was very sexy. It was and like I said, the clothes were baggy, like sort of a takeoff from the suits look kind of thing. And my father had a bunch of zoot suits because he was a trumpet player in the 40s, and he opened for like Count Basie and some other groups. And anyway, so David was at dinner at my parents' house one night, and my father was talking about his time in the 40s, and he showed David one of his zoot suits, and so David went, "Oh my God, could I borrow the suit?" My dad's silk ties and the chain, everything, and so my dad said, "Yeah, no problem." My dad gave it to him. And so what he did was he wore it a couple of times, and then he had Freddie Beretti, who was the guy that made his clothes, knock off. When you say knock off, that means he took elements of the suit and made it more David Bowie.
Yeah.
And that's how it began. And so the Gouster I told him that it was called the Gousters, this look, and that was where he got it from.
Yeah. And that was almost the name of the album.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And everybody kept saying Gouster means this and Gouster means that. They didn't know what it meant because they didn't. And David didn't know what it meant till I told him. It was like it was the Gouster was the cool look, kind of what that meant. Gouster, you cool dance, cool look, kind of thing.
Yeah. So it's this iteration of David Bowie that really was introduced to American television audiences when he and you started appearing on shows that I'm going to ask you about two of them. But the point I'm making is when he was Ziggy Stardust, I know the 1984 show was on the Midnight Special, but I don't think he did any talk shows. I don't think an American audience knew him other than from his music.
No. That was our first big show, because I remember when he was saying we were going to do it, he goes, well, it's the Midnight Special, so it's going to be shown in America and everything like that, and it's going to be filmed in London.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were really excited about it. We had so much fun doing that show. And and that was when I really felt so much a part of it, It's like our performances with David were just it was perfect. And I love that I was standing right next to him on the stage when we did the stuff. It was just so wonderful.
So that is a really just an amazing spectacle, that show. But I'm going to ask you about two other appearances that came after. Can you explain how significant it was that David Bowie, and you were there performing with him, was on Soul Train?
Oh, it was. I didn't perform that day, but I was there. No, it was the most, because David was shocked himself that he got Soul Train, because no other white artist had been on that show.
Yeah,
he was the first one, as far as I know, and he was a little bit nervous about it, but the audience was totally, receptive to him. And then, Fame was like a big hit, a big hit. Nobody expected
first number
it
one.
to be. Yeah, nobody expected it to be. It was just like when we did Fame in Electric Ladyland in New York, and that day that, like if any of you ever went to the David Is, any of those the things in the museum pieces that he did, there's a parchment that I didn't even know was there, that when I did a interview with PBS television here in Chicago, Channel 11, and they said, well, Ava, what do you think about the page out of David's diary that's in the exhibition about you? And I'm like, what do you mean? And he said, well, it says, today I introduced Ava to a Beatle, John Lennon, and we worked on Fame.
Yeah. John, so tell, in case somebody for some reason doesn't know, what was John Lennon's contribution to Fame?
Oh, man. Well, it was the Fame. 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 That was John. John's was the high part, Fame. He would answer David. When David said Fame, he answered David. And the Fame, that's me and David and John. Because David just said to me, Ava, go in the studio and just keep going, Fame. And I said, why? He goes, don't ask me why. Just do it. Just go in and do it. And so I did it. And that was how it ended, with that at the end. But I remember the day that we went in to do it, David was nervous because he was going to meet John Lennon for the first time. And I had never seen him be so excited about anybody as he was about meeting John. And he said to me before John got there, he said, Ava, I wonder if John is going to be wearing those granny glasses that he always wears. And so I'm like, I don't know. The doorbell rings. He goes to the door. He opens the door, and it's John with the granny glasses on. And he turns around to me. I'm right behind him. And he goes, oh, he's got the glasses on. And he's just beaming all day long. And he was in the best mood I ever saw him in, that he was with John Lennon. Oh, my God.
Wow.
And John was like, oh, this is such a lovely day. I haven't spent such a wonderful time in the studio in so long. This is really nice. He was really enjoying it. And he and Yoko invited us to dinner afterwards at the Dakota. But Yoko was so wonderful. She came in while we were recording, and she brought us a tray of sushi, and then she left. And I kind of understand why the Beatles didn't like her, because she was women's lib all the way, baby. She was women's rights all the way. But John respected that totally. He totally respected it.
A story you tell about how the four of you were together through the night, and in the morning, David Bowie says, "Ava, can you make some breakfast?"
Yeah.
And what did Yoko Ono say?
And Yoko was like, excuse me, why should she make breakfast? She was up all night like all of us. Why should she be the one to make the breakfast? David's looking at her like in total amazement that she said that. And John was over in the corner, sitting in the kitchen, laughing his butt off. He was cracking up. He was like, he was like, because he loved Yoko, and he saw his woman take up for other women, and he was loving that. He was not a male chauvinist of any kind. Yeah. He was, and David was mad at first, but guess what? I didn't make the breakfast.
You didn't make the breakfast.
When she said that, I just stopped. I was going over towards the skillet, and then I just looked at him, and I just stopped. So he was mad at me afterwards.
Well, that's great. This is not to get off track. My day job is in New York State government, and I live in Albany, New York. And Yoko Ono lives in the Hudson Valley, in New York City, and she comes up, and she's very active in advocating, usually environmental issues. But she is still a progressive-minded, person who lets her voice be heard to this day.
Yeah. Yes. I have the utmost respect for Yoko. I do.
Yeah.
And when I saw that, what she did that day, then I understood, because then we were in the living room, and they had this. If you've ever been in the Dakota, it's all these huge rooms, like apartment-sized rooms, in this one apartment.
Yeah.
And it was, we were in the living room. They had two chaise lounges. One was on one side of the room, one was on the other side. And they were sitting on one side, and we were sitting on the other. And Yoko was sitting up, and John was talking to David with him lying his head on Yoko's lap. And David looked at me, and he said, "Why is?" He couldn't understand. He couldn't understand the way that John loved Yoko in that way, that he was kind of almost subservient to her. And he wasn't subservient. He was a man of his own. He was a strong man, but he understood her, that whatever she did was, she loved him too, and that he wasn't afraid to show that he could put his head on her lap or whatever, and I saw that about her. It was really something. She really had a powerful influence on him. Wow.
I'm thinking of the cover of a Double Fantasy, where it's just so apparent that they had a genuinely loving relationship.
Oh my gosh, they did. They did. So that was that, and just John was always so sweet. He's very sweet to me, and I'll always remember him fondly.
So let me ask you one more question about this era, and if it's okay, we'll take a quick break. And
okay.
So I wanted to ask you about. So you were with David Bowie when he did Soul Train, but you didn't perform. But you did perform when he appeared on the Dick Cavett show. And people remember two things about this appearance. The one was that when David Bowie was talking to Dick Cavett, he was clearly influenced by something. But the other thing people remember is your dance during a song that I think, you could correct me if I'm wrong, was came before Fame, but there was elements of it that were Foot stomping, yeah.
Yeah,
So that dance. So tell us about that.
Yeah, because I never knew that dance move that I did was going to be so, go so viral as it did, because I wasn't expecting it to happen. When I was standing there, I was just standing there just moving like, just David dancing, and I wasn't even expecting the camera to be on me. But then David just turned around to me all of a sudden and said, "Do it, Cherry." And when he did that, I was like, "Oh my God!" My brain was going, "Oh my God, he wants me to do something." And then I didn't want to embarrass him, and I wanted to show him that I could connect, and I connected right away. I just started moving. I didn't even. I just started dancing, and I said, "Okay, let me just keep twirling around. Let me just keep twirling around," and it was perfect because everybody was messed. They were like, "Wow, I can't believe you did that. I can't believe you did that." But he would constantly test me like that. He would constantly test me and say, "I wonder if I just say, move, Ava, how's she gonna react?" I could have just looked at him and went just shake my head or something like that, and he would have quickly moved away from me, and the camera would have too. But I was gonna get my camera moment.
Oh yeah. No, it's the highlight of it. Like, if you're listening to this and you have never seen this, the clip is on YouTube, Foot Stomping. Find it. It's amazing. And you'll forget it's a David Bowie song. You'll just think it's an Ava Cherry dance. But it's
I know.
Yeah.
I know. And you know something? And then he tested me again in that way. I'll tell you how he did. He was saying, our first major gig with the Young Americans album was at the Universal Amphitheater in L.A., and he says, "Okay, so we're going to be in front of 25,000 people." And I was like, "Ooh, David, I don't think I can do it. I'm terrified. I've never performed in front of that many people before." He goes, "Oh yeah, you could do it. It's not a big deal." And I said, "Oh no, I don't think." He goes, "Listen, you're going to do it, and don't give me that. You're not going to do it. You're going to do it." And he said, "You'll be fine." And I said, "Okay." So I remember that night. That stage was so huge, and it was like, it was a beautiful night outside. It was so beautiful, and the lights went down and blah blah blah, and then they introduced David, and then just people screaming. Elizabeth Taylor was there that night. A bunch of people. I think Michael Jackson. A bunch of people were there. So the spots, there were like 3 spots on David all at once, 3 big spots, and then we had our little, So David's singing, and I'm singing my parts, and I'm like, okay, I'm okay on this side, right? Okay. All of a sudden, I see David take his mic out of the mic stand and come towards me. And I'm like, what is he doing? He would always do like crazy stuff like that to me, right? And so he comes over to me and so of course when he walks over to me, all the spots go on me while he's standing there next to me, right? And he starts singing in his mic, and right next to me with his head right next to mine. And so I was doing my part, and then I was loving it. It was so loving how he did it. He just came over and just, "Come on, let's do it, girl. Bye, bye, bye," and whatever we were singing, I don't remember what it was, Rebel, Rebel or something. And it was fantastic, John. And then after that, he was like, "So what did you think about that?" And I said, "Oh, that was fantastic. I could do it again." And he goes, "Well, good." But he showed me so many times that I could do what I didn't know I could do.
Yeah, that's amazing.
He was my mentor. Yeah.
You had these 2 great mentors, David Bowie and Luther Vandross. That's amazing.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Luther certainly was. And I didn't know he was going to be.
Yeah.
But he certainly was.
So, Ava Cherry, thank you very much. This is just amazing. And if you're listening to this when it first comes out, we are going to come back next week with part 2. But Ava and I are going to take a break right now. And I know you're going to want to come back because, I could listen to these stories all day long. It's just amazing. Except I want to listen to some of the music. So, so Ava, thank you for joining me today. And we'll talk again next week.
Thank you, everybody. Much love.
Thank you.